PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a mental disorder that comes from a traumatic experience that basically like terrifies you and basically kind of etches itself into your brain. Sometimes it is also known as an invisible injury because PTSD, you can't physically see it. When you get PTSD, you don't ever know. You may not ever know the person has it until you see their mannerisms of how they are perceived and how they act around people in public. Coming from a military family, I've seen how PTSD can affect people in numerous ways, how it can affect their everyday lives, how it can affect their children. I lost my dad in 2006 overseas, and I have met a few of his buddies that were with him overseas, and I now see how PTSD has affected them and how it has impacted their lives as they grow past that moment. Not only does it impact their everyday lives, but it also impacts their family's everyday lives and how their family copes with them having PTSD. According to PTSD.va.gov, in 2009, the suicide rate among male veteran VA users was 38.3 per 100,000 soldiers, compared to 12.8 per 100,000 in female soldiers. This subject, like I said earlier, hits home for me. Since I grew up in a military family, I had the chance of seeing how PTSD can affect soldiers every day in their everyday lives and how it can affect their families' everyday lives. It interests me just how much a disorder of such can impact a soldier in their everyday life. I've seen cases of PTSD so bad that some soldiers can't leave their home for however many days or however many years. Because going out into public for them would be way too mentally stimulating, and at that point in time they couldn't handle the mental stimulation and all that. PTSD impacts many people in this world, and some may not be soldiers, but could also be their family. 10% to 18% of soldiers or troops are likely to have PTSD after they return home. That's quite a bit considering how many soldiers are overseas as of now. One reason it impacts families so much is because PTSD can make a soldier seem like a different person as to what they were when they went overseas to fight in war originally. According to PTSD United, 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. This would equal out to be about 223.4 million people. Some of these people could not only be soldiers, but also spouses or children of military personnel. And some of these military personnel or soldiers could be of people that passed away overseas, and they have traumatic experiences from all the stuff that went on during the funeral processions. PTSD United reported that up to 20% of these people go on to develop PTSD. This would equal 44.7 million people who were or are struggling with PTSD. PTSD United also estimated that 1 out of every 9 women develop PTSD. This would make them twice as likely as men to have PTSD. PTSD mentioned that according to the VA, experts estimate that up to 20% of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom veterans have PTSD, and up to 10% of Gulf War veterans and up to 30% of Vietnam War veterans have experienced PTSD. Consequently, the demand for PTSD treatment continues to grow for these soldiers. In the military, 17% of the combat troops are women. With this being said, 71% of the female soldiers develop PTSD for numerous reasons. Not only can these reasons be that they're fighting over war, but also could be sexual harassment from them being females in the military overseas when it's a fairly heavy male-populated area. Family members have several different feelings towards a loved one that could have PTSD. They could have avoidance. They could feel avoidance. They could feel like they're like they're not being loved as much by this loved one. They could have depression, they could have anger, they could feel guilt that they can't help them. Maybe they caused some of it, they think. And they could also suffer from health problems. Some of these health problems could consist of having raised drinking problems, increase in smoking, and then they could have a loss of exercise as they go on in life in dealing with this PTSD. The disorder of PTSD can have different impacts on children and what it does on adults. Brainline Military reported that children can have symptoms that are similar to their injured parents. Kind of like whatever the parent has, the kid will have it too. If a child was to show similar symptoms of their injured parents, they would be told to have secondary traumatization. Secondary traumatization would be the trauma didn't happen exactly to the kid, but it happened to the parent, and the kid is picking up on the mannerisms and how the parent acts. So the kid picks up on that, and they think they had a problem with it, or they may have caused it, so they start acting like that about the parent because they think that it's normal to act like that. The invisible injuries of PTSD impact children differently as well. Some kids could start to act out more with their bad behaviors. These kids could also get to feel isolated than what they did before the parent left for overseas. With the children feeling isolated, they could also feel embarrassed from their problems. They feel feeling isolated, you feel like you're by yourself, so you feel like nobody wants you. Therefore, that would bring you down more, and you could have depression, like I said earlier. You could feel anger to having new responsibilities, like having to take care of your parent more than what you did before they went overseas because they have a brain issue as such as PTSD. As they take more care of the parent, they could start to have self-blame if the parent doesn't get better. They could feel like they're not doing enough for the parent as they are for somebody else because the parent's not getting any better as they're taking care of them. Not only can PTSD impact someone mentally, but it can also lead to suicide. According to PTSD.VA, from 1999 to 2010, the suicide rate in the U.S. population among males was 19.4 per 100,000 compared to 4.9 over 100,000 in females. In 2009, male veterans that used the VA had a suicide rate of 39.3 per 100,000, and females were 12.8 per 100,000. This statistic kind of catches my eye because there's fewer females than males in the military. So the 12.8 that I said earlier is quite a bit of a big number for the military and the females in it because there's not many of them. PTSD.VA also reported that data from the National Comorbidity Survey, a nationally representative sample, showed that PTSD alone, out of 6 anxiety diagnoses, was significantly associated with suicidal ideas or attempts. Research showed that combat-related PTSD in the Vietnam era of veterans was a more significant predictor of both suicide attempts and preoccupation with suicide is combat-related guilt. Combat-related guilt would be one of your buddies had gotten shot and they died, and the soldier felt like they could have done more to help save the soldier, but in the end, the soldier ended up passing away, and they would have passed away anyway, no matter how much you helped that soldier out, because the soldier could feel like they needed to do more, therefore they feel guilty because they died and the soldier didn't do enough to help them. Veterans can experience thoughts and extreme guilt about acts committed during war. Like another act that you could feel guilty about is just being in war alone, and maybe you have to shoot a kid due to them being part of the war. So you have to shoot a kid. So now you feel guilty that you had just shot a kid. There are certain risk factors that can cause an increased risk of PTSD. Some of these factors include longer deployment times, seeing others wounded or killed, not being married, and having a lower rank. If you're over there and you have a lower rank, you could feel like you don't have as much importance due to the war. You're doing a lot of grunt work. You're not necessarily putting in work, or you're not noticed as big as what the guys with a higher rank would be. I hope that me giving this speech and giving you these stats and information, you can now see how PTSD affects a soldier and impacts their everyday lives. It can also impact a family's life, and I hope you saw how having to help cope and help take care of a soldier with PTSD can affect a family, and how the families can impact from PTSD as well. Thank you.